course, at that time my heart was in my throat, and don't let anybody kid you. I think anybody in that position has got to be scared. But that was one time I did talk to the Lord. Mm-hmm. I'm John Caudle. I live in the garden spot of Davie County of Farmington.
Right in the center of Davie County.
That's right.
And are you a native of Davie County?
Yes, I was actually born in the Farmington area and lived here basically all my life, except the time I was in the service, and about 2 years other than that.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's go right into the story of your experience in World War II. How old were you whenever you went into the war? And did you enlist? How did you get into the war?
Well, I graduated in 1943, just out of Farmington High School, and I volunteered for the Air Force at that time. I had to wait until I was 18 before I could be inducted, and January the 31st of 44. On a Friday afternoon, I went home and I had my orders to report to Fort Bragg on Monday morning by myself, and I was one more scared little boy.
And how old were you?
I was just had turned 18.
Wow. So you got those orders, you were living in Farmington, and how did you get to Fort Bragg? A bus?
On a Greyhound bus.
Mm-hmm. And were you on a bus with people that you knew? Was there other people from our community, or were you set out on your own?
I was on my own, and say when I reported into Fort Bragg, it was raining, mm-hmm. and I was by myself and had to start asking questions of where I was supposed to go and what I was to do. Mm-hmm. Well, at Fort Bragg, I stayed there, I think it was a total of 3 days. That was just an indoctrination where we joined up with a total group for basic training, and we boarded the train, I guess it's about the 4th day, for Miami Beach. Mm-hmm. We went through basic training in Miami Beach, stayed in hotels right in downtown along the Biscayne Bay on Collins Avenue in Miami Beach. That was quite an experience. But you had to hit the water every morning at 5 o'clock. Whether you could swim or not, you had to go in the water. That was quite an experience. We did all of our drill, so forth, and basic training, exercise, and so forth in the parks, mm-hmm. In Miami Beach. I went enlisted as an aviation cadet, and started the program there. We took all the basics, but at that particular time, is the way the government worked, Army worked at that time. It depended on what field they needed men in, and at that particular time they needed a lot of people in other fields other than pilot training. So I was one of the unlucky ones that got transferred into a gunnery school at Harlingen, Texas, and that's where I went through gunnery school on a B-24. And I finished that after about 6 weeks. Went to Omaha, Nebraska, I believe I've forgotten the name of the field, just outside of Omaha. And we transferred to a B-29 squadron. And the first time I saw one of those planes, I said, it'll never get off the ground.
Big plane.
That was a big monster at that particular time.
Mm-hmm. So, 4 engines?
Oh, yes. For 2,200 horsepower each engine, I think.
Each?
Each,
mm-hmm.
each.
So you went from there, what was your next journey?
To Wendover, Utah. And we went on to the field. It was completely empty. We had I believe it was the 393rd Squadron 504th Group. We went on to the field, and it was completely empty. And we couldn't figure out what was going on, actually, because we wondered why this squadron was there by ourselves. After the first day, everybody was called together and said, what you see here, what you hear here, leave it here. Mm-hmm. And that really was the beginning of the atomic bomb group training. Mm-hmm. And I did go down to see, I believe Tom Farabee was major at that time. I went down to see him one time while I was there.
And you knew him, I'm assuming.
I had heard of him before, and I just went down to visit him for a short time. And but anyway, as a result of that experience, there was actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 gunners on the plane, and this particular group was only going to use one, which would be a so-called central fire control gunner. He was located amidship up the top, and he could control all guns from that one location. So I was a tail gunner, so they had no need of me there. So I was shipped out back to Clovis, New Mexico, and then from there on over to the Pacific. Landed on Tinian first, Saipan, and then 2 days later went down to Tinian, where I was based, and flew my missions over Japan out of there. Well, there was 2 ways to get into the plane. One was through the nose wheel area. That's where the pilot, co-pilot, bombardier, radio operator, and navigator went in. The rest of us went in back towards the tail end section. There was a side door where we all went in. Of course, you had to have ladders to get in the plane. There was a tunnel, what we call the tunnel, between the back of the plane and the nose that was about maybe 28 inches in diameter. And I think it was about, I've forgotten now, something like 20 feet in length that you had to crawl through to get from the front to the back. Well, this when you got to the out to the end of the tunnel, there was an open passageway where the midship side gunners sat. There's one on each side that had a bubble that they sat in, and they'd have full range of view from the tail to the nose of the plane. To go to the tail, you went back to the bulkhead into the tail, and there was a hole there about with a bulkhead about 2 foot, a little better, 28, maybe 30 inches in diameter. You crawl through, and once you crawl through, then you could squeeze up, and a folding seat would come down behind you. You could stand up pretty well in the back. And it was close quarters.
Were you ever claustrophobic?
Not really. I went through, when I went through gunnery school, started out on a B-24, and that it was just like a barrel on the back end of that tail, and that was just like you were sitting out into open space, and that was a little bit scary for the first time or two. You got used to it. So
let me repeat what you said earlier. You left Salt Lake City, I believe you said?
Wendover, Utah.
Wendover, Utah, and then you flew to Saipan, or?
Well, I went from there to Clovis, New Mexico, and we formed the group there, and then we went to landed on Saipan, and then moved over to Tinian 2 days.
What was the name of your group?
It was a 768th. What I ended up in the 768th Squadron, a 462nd group.
So you're based in the Pacific.
On Tinian.
On Tinian. How long were you there before you had to go on a full-fledged combat mission?
I got on Tinian like this morning, and tomorrow afternoon I was headed on my first mission to Japan.
Did you know when you landed on that island it was going to be that quick?
No. You had no, on the time you had a warning. Sometime was a schedule. We knew like this afternoon if we were going to fly tomorrow.
Is it a beautiful island?
It's a Marianas group. Well, it wasn't at that time. It was the landscape was mostly just a rocky cliff island. The trees, what trees were there, had been basically destroyed in the landing. So it wasn't a very attractive place at the time.
What was your gut reaction when you were told we're going tomorrow? How did John Caudle accept that? How did you take that?
I said many times I was kind of a scared country boy at that time. I didn't really know what to anticipate. Didn't have time really to talk to anybody that had already flown the missions, And actually, I flew my first 2 missions was not with my crew. I flew with a new crew that had some experience, and that's the way they worked. They took a new crew over and they'd split them up to go a mission or 2 with a new crew that had already flown.
So how that first mission? How long was that mission? The flight total?
I think that particular one was 14 hours and 40 minutes.
Okay.
From takeoff to landing.
So let's kind of go through that. Let's go through the 14 hours in about 3 minutes here. You took off, loud noise. You weren't in the back at that time.
No, you didn't have to hold your position in it until we got within a couple hundred miles of the affected area where they'd expect combat.
So when you were within 100 miles, you were told to go to your assigned position. And on that first mission, was it a full-fledged combat mission, or was it a no-go?
It was really the indoctrination put you full bore into the first one, because Yokohama was the name of the town that we hit. The mission was scheduled for 21,000 21,000 feet in elevation. As we approached the target area, I could see the puffs of smoke all around us, and I've told somebody at times it looked like you could just get out and walk on those puffs of smoke. They were so thick, and that was anti-aircraft fire. Of course, at that time my heart was in my throat, and don't let anybody kid you. I think anybody in that position has got to be scared. But that was one time I did talk to the Lord. And I'm not ashamed to admit it. I talked to him all the way through that thing to ask him to look after me and to look after my wife.
So you were married at that time?
Yes, I hadn't been married it was just a few months.
Did you have a photograph of her on the plane?
Oh, yes.
Did you ever get that out and look at her?
I had a little heart-shaped thing that I'd made into a necklace with her picture in it, and I had that around my neck at that time. But that was a tough one. I knew we had been hit because you could, that flak, if it hit you up close enough, you could hear the thud. And I heard a wind noise that was strange at the time. I didn't know where it was or what it was until we got back to base. But anyway, we were lucky to get through that mission, as the anti-aircraft was so intense. And when we got away from the bomb run, the fighter aircraft was around us at that time too. Of course, me being
the Zeros.
Yeah, well, there was Zeros and I forgot now, Betty's. I think might have been a bomber. I've forgotten now some of the other names of the Japanese planes at that time. But me being in the tail, my line of vision was somewhat limited because I could only see from about here to here, and all I could see basically was the tracer bullets coming by. That was an indication that there was somebody coming at you from up front, you know. Of course, our forward gunners would always tell you when somebody was coming in.
So could you hear the captain as well as? Oh
yeah, we were all on the intercom. I mean, we had the radio intercom system throughout. And
when you're being shot at, is there panic on that radio system, or does it go quiet?
You know, it's amazing how, I guess we went through the training, but how calm it really was considering the moment. Because everybody was, giving what details needed to be given, nothing else. There was no excited chatter or anything that much on it. But of course, everybody, yes, was excited, but it was surprising how calm it was. You see the movies where in Germany, I guess, and in Japan too, or in the Pacific, where fighter planes attacking a bomber would be out there just, gunners would have 10, 15 seconds of firing time. That's not true. Being in the tail position, I only had about 2 to 3 seconds of firing time, because you consider we were traveling at about 300 miles an hour, and the fighter's same thing coming at us, so you're basically looking at 600 mile speed, so it didn't take long for him to get out of view.
14 hours, you obviously ate on the plane.
Yes.
Tell me, I'm just curious. I mean, what would a group take to eat on a 14-hour flight?
It's an Air Force sandwich.
Oh, really?
Peanut butter and jelly.
So they didn't give you a steak meal or anything like that on these planes?
No, the one hand, kind of a joke, when you got back to the base, they go up for a briefing or follow-up. They had a shot of whiskey they gave everybody the opportunity to have.
Was that before the mission?
That was after.
Oh,
that was after. I went through that line twice. So
Let me say this. If I would have been shot at, I think I'd have probably been in that line with you. How many missions did you fly?
Really, I didn't have but actually 7 combat missions, and at about 12. We flew missions on some of the other little islands that were off. I expect I had 12, 15 there, but they were not considered necessarily combat missions.
Was the first one the scariest mission?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Was. That one, and I guess there was one other that in the latter part of the war, the Japanese come up with this so-called Baka bomb. It was actually what it was, is a flying bomb. That pilot knew when he got in that thing he was going to die because there was no landing gear or anything on it. It was just a flying bomb that was released from a bomber.
A kamikaze.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And his mission was to fly into your plane.